Last 3 months, when we found out that they were going to fine her $500 a day after 30 days, $1,000 after 60 days, I said, okay, we're going to hit the streets. We're going to there every Friday.
Where?
From 5:30 to 7 at Fruitvale and MacArthur. So without more, and also Steve Zeltzer is part of Labor Week. He's part of, check out, I think that, how do you say that, Labor Week?
Work Week.
Work Week. And he's also got a video called really great project, and he's been a leader in many of these fights for Chelsea and Julian and all the whistleblowers. So his, don't go to Labor Video, go to Labor Video Project. If you go to Labor Video, you'll see Woman in Labor.
Are you saying Work Week?
Yeah, Work Week is KPFA. His YouTube is Labor Video Project, and it's extremely good, informative information. And he always films the rallies against the British and against the Australians, etc. Hey, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having this important discussion on the defense of Julian Assange, of Chelsea Manning, and all journalists and whistleblowers. Because it's not just about these two individuals. So, what are we talking about with the vicious attack on Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Snowden, and many other journalists? We're talking about a crisis of imperialism, is what we're talking about. The imperialists do not want the truth revealed about what is going on. That is what this is all about. If they were telling secrets about other things, that would be fine. But when you talk about the crimes of the United States in Iraq, the crimes of the United States in Libya and Honduras by Hillary Clinton, when she was involved in the overthrow of the government and creating this desperate situation of people, she, of course, there are no crimes for her. There are no criminal prosecution. One good thing, I think, is we could have, in this period with this crisis, internal crisis of capitalism, we could have hearings in the Congress against Trump and the crimes of Trump and his gangsters, and hearings in the Senate on the crimes of the Democrats. Biden and his son in Ukraine the privatization of Ukraine is a crime.
Yeah.
It's the looting of Ukraine. Both parties, it's a bipartisan project to destroy Ukraine and loot it. And both of the parties are involved in it. So I think we have an opportunity, and this is the kind of crimes that were being exposed in WikiLeaks. The crimes of both parties. It wasn't just the Democrats. So we have to fix this issue or look at this issue from the point of view of what's happening with imperialism and what that means. And I think, also it's not something out there. It's right here in the Bay Area. There's a journalist, Brian Carmody, who I don't particularly agree with his politics, but he released information about around the murder of Jeff Adachi, the district attorney. And lo and behold, he was attacked by the police. His home was raided. His office was raided. They put him in handcuffs. And they had a subpoena signed by 3 or 4 subpoenas signed by judges arresting him. Now, these judges knew, some of them, that he was a journalist. There's an act called the Field Act in California, which protects journalists. So it was an illegal attack on Brian Carmody. They accused him of conspiring to get information illegally. So it was a frame-up of Brian Carmody. Now, so they have this illegal action, and guess what? The police commission, which has covered up the crimes of the police, of Greg Sir and other police who've killed African Americans and allowed racist cops to cover up after sending racist texts. Guess what? The police commission is now going to investigate the crimes that were done against Brian Carmody. You know how far that's going to go? Well, actually, the Democrats are involved in this. The Democratic mayor, London Breed, and guess where the Attorney General is? Xavier Becerra, nowhere in sight. So here's a crime by the police and the capitalist politicians in San Francisco against a journalist violating the Field Act in California. There's no investigation. There's no prosecution. by these politicians and attorney general who are supposed to be enforcing the law. When we talk about the law, what we're talking about is it's a law for the capitalist class, really. That's what the law is for. To go after working people, to go after poor people, to go after whistleblowers who are telling the truth about what the capitalists are doing or exposing the truth.
The Rosenbergs.
Well, Rosenbergs, I mean, there's a long history of how the law is used and not used, which we can go into. But I want to talk about, and additionally, what is the role of the labor movement and the left in the cases of Julian Assange? Well, the Newspaper Guild, of which I'm a member, and the Pacific Media Workers Guild, which is the local, you would think that they would be taking a stand against the attack on Julian Assange, because under the sedition law and the other laws that they're prosecuting him on, the National Security Act, they could go after every newspaper that published anything from the WikiLeaks. They could go after journalists, saying you're committing the same things. So you would think that my union, which is part of the CWA, would take a clear stand. No! They just had a national convention. Now, what we did in the Bay Area is we organized with some other activists in the San Francisco Labor Council to pass a resolution to defend Julian Assange. And the bureaucrats of the Labor Council tried for a long time to prevent it even from being voted on. Because it called out the government, the U.S. government, it called out the prosecution of him as a whistleblower, and it called out, let's prosecute the real criminals who were involved in the attacks in Iraq and around the world. Those are the people who should be prosecuted, not the whistleblowers who exposed their crimes. So after a long struggle, we actually got a resolution passed, the only resolution by any union that I know about in the United States to defend Julian Assange, to call for his freedom. So what we did is we brought that resolution to our local and said that they should endorse it. Now, this is the local representing journalists, the Chronicle, different newspapers and journals. And guess what? They said, no, we can't endorse him. And one of the people said, well, he raped somebody. There are charges of rape. Another person said he's not a journalist because he publishes WikiLeaks and he's not a journalist. So there were all kinds of excuses. So they actually had a vote. We forced them. They didn't even want to have a vote on this. We forced them to have a vote, and they voted 4-3 against a resolution supporting Julian Assange. So it would not go to the convention of the CWA. So you're talking about an organization which supposedly is supposed to represent journalists, and they won't even take a stand for Julian Assange, even when the Labor Council is endorsing it. Because the position of the journalists, unfortunately, in the United States, is they have to be objective. Objectivity, have you heard that word?
I've never seen it.
And their idea of objectivity is you can't take positions as a journalist, and not only can you not take positions as a journalist, you can't even have your union take a position as a journalist, because that would influence your reporting. This is the position of the journalist union, in the United States. So, I mean, it's totally bourgeois ideology of what journalism is. The idea that journalists can't take positions, and not only that, the San Francisco Chronicle bans journalists from even marching in a women's march or an anti-war march, but they did not ban them from marching in the gay march in San Francisco. That was okay, but not, anti-war, not women's march. I mean, so basically they decide what you can march in and what political activity you can be involved in. And journalist Henry Knorr has been retaliated against for supporting the Palestinian struggle, for marching, for being arrested. So they have a completely double standard, and our unions need to expose this double standard, this hypocrisy of the bosses, of the owners, the Hearst Corporation. We have to educate people on who these publishing companies are. And I think that that's a critical task. Now, also the left, quote-unquote left, in the Bay Area, I'm on the local station board at KPFA, I introduced a resolution to support Julian Assange, to call for his freedom. And guess what? Guess what? There are people, the majority of the local station board said, well, we can't take a position on Julian Assange. All we can do is talk about him and encourage people to talk about him. This is what they said. We can't take a position. We can't advocate the freedom of Julian Assange. And not only that, we were able, by supporters, Alex Stein and others in New York, to get a resolution back in the Pacifica board in favor of Julian Assange. They didn't even want to vote on this locally. So the resolution comes back here, and this Carol Wolfley, who's the secretary of the local station board, comes up to me and says, we want to make a little change in your resolution to take out the word freedom for Julian Assange. That's what she said to me. I said, no compromise on that. So they refused to pass a resolution. They passed a resolution and said we should talk about it, about what's happening in journalists, but not any demands. So there's going to be a meeting of the KPFA local station board on October the 19th at 11 a.m. at the South Berkeley Senior Center. People should go and protest this. And these same people are engaged in trying to shut people down, expel them if they have different points of view. And they also want to take over Pacifica, appointing a self-appointed board. They don't want elections anymore. Have you heard that before? Democracy, let's not have elections. They're getting in the way of things, you know. It's another part of the agenda at KPFA, unfortunately. But the last thing I want to say briefly is the whistleblowers in the Bay Area. Gerald Whitman is a federal OSHA whistleblower who exposed the cover-up, the retaliation against whistleblowers. Michael Madry, who exposed the cover-up in Hunters Point and Bayview and Treasure Island, which are radioactive nuclear dump sites they're building housing on.
Right.
And there was an article in the Chronicle 2 weeks ago about the fact that it somehow did not end up in the Superfund site list. You know, so here you have a nuclear dump site, and somehow mysteriously it doesn't end up in the Superfund site, so they don't have to follow more stringent rules. So guess what? Guess who's behind this cover-up? Nancy Pelosi,
Of course.
Dianne Feinstein, Gavin Newsom, London Breed.
Oh, man.
All these people know about it, but money, they want to build $1 million condos on this radioactive nuclear dump. And that people have been contaminated on, the community, black community, cancer epidemics.
In Richmond too, man.
In Richmond too. It's the same in the Bay Area. So has there been any demand for accountability? Has there been any demand to expose this? 6 whistleblowers at Tetra Tech exposed it. They lost their jobs, and 2 officials at Tetra Tech went to prison. But they're still building. There's been no exposure of the fact that the whistleblowers were exposing not just crimes of these companies, but politicians in the Bay Area who are national politicians. Nancy Pelosi is fighting for the whistleblowers. But when it comes to the whistleblowers right here in the Bay Area, somehow she's missing in action. So this is, I think, what we have to expose to people. The real whistleblowers who are exposing the crimes of capitalism, the crimes of the criminality of capitalism, they're the ones that get targeted, they're the ones that get punished, while they go after the CIA for whistleblowing against their political enemies, the Democrats' political enemy, Trump. So it's total hypocrisy, it's duplicity. We need to call it out, and we need to organize to defend these brothers and sisters who have been victimized, who have been imprisoned and tortured because of telling the truth to the people of this country. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
And if you want to know about Hunter's Bayview Point or other things, go to Labor Video Project, and you will see films of things like this. I've been in numerous ones, and he's a real leader in the Bay Area. Here's Ricardo from Puerto Rico.
Hi, my name is Ricardo Ortiz. I'm a past and former founding member of the Frente Socialista Puerto Rico, and I also collaborate with Labor Fairs, Labor Video Project, and many other things. I just wanna, talk about the role of the press, historical cases of whistleblowers, including journalists, that a successful campaign have got them free, and the state of affairs that we are facing in this society. I just wanna start by saying, Chelsea Manning and Assange both are victims of capitalism in its highest stage, imperialism. So what they did was expose, how the United States military intelligence apparatus intervenes and oppresses people around the world, and definitely that's a consensus that the capitalist class doesn't want to be broken. As a soldier, Chelsea Manning is part of what the classic Marxists define the domination of the state over people. They describe that the capitalist state is based on armed groups of men, and in this case, contemporary men and women, organized to oppress the working class. So when you got soldiers that rebel against that establishment, definitely something that the capitalist state cannot tolerate. I will not tolerate. I will prosecute. So Chelsea did expose, the role of the United States military on this question. And definitely one of, right here I see Gene. Gene and I are the only ones probably that wore an American military uniform at one point in our lives. And we know that is something called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that one of, the articles to prosecute these, these orders. Don't this, you have to disobey always general orders and orders in general. And definitely Chelsea broke out with that, and the capitalists went out to get her with vengeance. But, definitely, and in the case of Assange as a journalist, definitely exposing these secrets, so-called secrets, etc. So, but as for example, there has been, even in recent times, successful campaigns to free individuals in similar situations, and I will quote one, the case of Catherine Gunn. Catherine Gunn was an intelligence official in the British Government Communications Office, which is the equivalent of the National Security Agency in the United States. Catherine Gunn, she exposed a secret communication between the NSA and the British government in matters of intelligence to discredit United Nations diplomats, because they wanna, the United States wanna justify, and the British government, they wanna justify the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So she exposed to a newspaper called The Observer these secret communications that the American and the British government were trying to frame and discredit diplomats from 6 countries. So a successful campaign was organized to defend her, and ultimately the British government desist from prosecuting Miss Catherine Gunn. So thanks for the activism of the British working class, British journalists, and even there were American prominent persons involved in that defense campaign, such as Daniel Ellsberg, Jesse Jackson, etc., etc. So it shows, as for example, that a coherent united front can defend people that are fighting for the truth and exposing, imperialist and capitalist oppression around the world. Also, I will mention the case of Daisy Sanchez, a Puerto Rican journalist. In 1990, she did interview the member of a clandestine organization called Los Macheteros, Mr. Filiberto Ojeda Rios, an activist that was accused by the United States government in absentia for crimes of interfering with their interstate commerce and so on. Ms. Sanchez interviewed for a Puerto Rican television channel, Mr. Ojeda, and then the FBI asked the Justice Department, the United States Justice Department, to convene a grand jury and summon Ms. Sanchez, and they want to have the original tapes of the interview, and she refused to give the original tapes, and she resisted. She said, "I will not surrender these tapes because that's even against the protections of the U.S. Constitution, First Amendment." A big campaign in Puerto Rico was organized, the labor movement, through all their support in favor of Ms. Sanchez, and ultimately a federal judge in Hartford, Connecticut, said, she doesn't have to give up these tapes to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, because that would have been an infringement of our First Amendment rights. You can Google that, Daisy Sanchez, Puerto Rican journalist, and you can read about the case. Daisy Daisy Sanchez.
Daisy, D-A-I-S.
D-A-I-S-Y. Just the English name. Daisy. Okay.
Country?
It's in Puerto Rico. Now I have to add a little bit more time because of the interruption. A couple of minutes. But anyways, we are leading to the point of the need to definitely unite front in defense of fighters for freedom and fighters for the truth, the whistleblowers and journalists. The way that things are going on in the world, particularly, are ones that the imperialist politicians and technocrats are saying that that they do have to contain information because war is not limited. The capitalist class does not limit war in terms of crude classical military actions. I got right here a work that General Rupert Smith, a former commander of the British Army in Northern Ireland, he led the British troops in Iraq during 2003. Also, he was the commander-in-chief of British forces in the Balkans during the U.S.-led NATO invasion. And he says in this book, The Utility of Force, that war has extended more than ever toward media, information, technology. So, the armed forces of the different so-called allies countries have to control the flow of information. Translate that to censorship. Yeah. That's what they are talking about. Okay. So, also, we gotta remember one thing. The so-called free press in America is not free. They are corporations. They are, look at the case of NBC. NBC is owned by General Electric, which is part of the industrial military complex. So we gotta, definitely seize illusions in terms of, a so-called free press. It's a monopoly capitalistic press involved in the industrial military complex. And we need to encourage journalists and workers in the press to organize their own independent media associations and, understand the need of criticize and oppose these on monopoly capital companies that deliver ultimately misinformation. I just want to, point out an example of the consciousness of United Front in terms of the press. Recently, you heard the campaign to make the governor of Puerto Rico to renounce his governorship. There were, 12 days of protests, etc. That was the result also of a good journalistic United Front independent journalist work. The Centro de Periodismo Independiente, which is translated as the Center of Independent Journalists in Puerto Rico, got the information that was used in a application called Telegram, which the governor was communicating with his aides and saying all these homophobic, all these deals that he was making. It was given to that center, the Center of Independent Journalism. And they were the ones that distributed to all the press. And if the other news companies would have not published it, they had their own website that they did publish it. So, it was a counter move against the monopoly or the more capitalistic, enterprises. But, that was done due to the conscientiousness of these workers, these journalists, that we need to organize independent. And we need to act independently of the, dominant capitalist press. So, I just want to say, and I just want to end that we need to continue exposing the role of the United States media, the United States corporations, the United States capitalism. And I want to say that all the capitalist politicians, including Bernie Sanders, actually Bernie Sanders recently voted for the F-35 super fighter bomber, to be constructed by the United States Armed Forces. The irony is that the city council, the city of Burlington, Vermont, the city that he had been a mayor in the past, approved a resolution opposing the Vermont Air National Guard to station F-35 planes in the airport in Vermont, in Burlington. So let's be aware of these supposedly progressive politicians.
Yeah.
We need to organize politically independently, and we need to create a working class party that champions the demands and the needs of the oppressed. Thanks.
Yeah.